In the vast plains of rural Nebraska, where endless fields of corn and wheat stretch toward the horizon, and where farming traditions have been passed down through generations of hardworking families, lived Dorothy Mitchell, a 77-year-old woman who had spent her entire life working the same 800-acre farm that had been in her family for over a century, a property known throughout the county as Son, set acres that had weathered the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, and countless economic hardships through the determination and resilience of the Mitchell family. Subscribe to the channel to help me reach 1,000 subscribers and bring you even better stories. Dorothy was a woman of remarkable strength and unwavering spirit, shaped by 7 decades of farm life under the harsh but beautiful conditions of the Nebraska plains, with steel-gray eyes that reflected both the wisdom accumulated through years of experience and a growing concern about the increasingly disturbing behavior of her only son, who seemed to have developed a ruthless obsession with Mo, that had gradually eroded his respect for family bonds and moral principles. The farm had been her life's work and her greatest pride, a sprawling operation that had specialized in corn and soybean production, along with cattle ranching, providing a substantial income that had allowed her to raise her son with strong values and excellent educational opportunities, though she had always lived modestly and reinvested most profits back into improving the land and equipment rather than pursuing luxurious lifestyle choices. Dorothy had been widowed 8 years earlier when her husband Frank had died in a farming accident, leaving her to manage the operation alone with the help of loyal farmhands who had worked for the family for decades. Though the physical demands of farming had become increasingly challenging as she had aged, and her strength had gradually diminished, making her more dependent on hired help and modern equipment. Her son, William Mitchell, now 48 years old, had grown up on the farm but had left for college on an academic scholarship, eventually earning an MBA from Northwestern University and building a highly successful career in investment banking that had made him extraordinarily wealthy, with a portfolio of investments, real estate holdings, and business ventures that had generated millions of dollars in personal wealth over the past 2 decades. William had married Rebecca, an ambitious woman from a wealthy Chicago family who had never shown any interest in rural life or in maintaining relationships with William's mother, preferring the sophisticated social circles and cultural amenities of urban life that matched her background and her aspirations for continued upward mobility in elite society. Their 2 children, Trevor, 22, and Madison, 19, had grown up in luxury in a mansion in one of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhoods, attending elite private schools and prestigious universities, with minimal connection to their grandmother's farm or understanding of the rural values and agricultural traditions that had shaped their father's character during his formative years. For years, Dorothy had hoped that William would eventually return to help manage the farm, or at least maintain regular contact with his family roots. But his visits had become increasingly infrequent as his business empire had expanded and his social obligations in Chicago had multiplied, leaving Dorothy feeling increasingly isolated and abandoned. "William, I'm getting older and this farm is becoming more difficult for me to manage alone," Dorothy had said during one of his rare visits the previous year. "I was hoping you might consider coming back to help, or at least spending more time here to learn about the operation." William had responded with the impatience of a busy executive who saw his mother's concerns as obstacles to his own financial priorities. "Mom, you need to face reality about your situation," he had replied curtly. "You're 77 years old, and you can't keep pretending you can run an 800-acre farm. It's time to sell the property and move somewhere more appropriate for your age." Dorothy had been hurt by his dismissive attitude toward the farm that represented her life's work and her family's heritage. "William, this farm has been in our family for 4 generations," she had protested. "Your great-great-grandfather homesteaded this land. It's not just property to be sold, it's our family's legacy and our connection to the past. "Mom, that's sentimental nonsense," William had responded, with the cold logic of a businessman focused solely on financial considerations. "Legacy doesn't generate cash flow or provide returns on investment. You need to think practically about maximizing the value of your assets." The conversation had revealed to Dorothy that her son had become someone she barely recognized, a wealthy man who had lost touch with the values and connections that had once defined their family. 6 months later, the situation had reached a crisis point when Dorothy had received an unexpected visit from a team of lawyers and real estate appraisers who had arrived at the farm claiming to represent William's interests. "Mrs. Mitchell, we're here to conduct a comprehensive evaluation of this property for potential sale," the lead attorney had announced. "Your son has retained our services to explore options for liquidating this asset." Dorothy had been shocked and outraged by this development. "I never authorized any evaluation of my property," she had protested. "This farm is not for sale, and my son has no authority to make decisions about my land." "Ma'am, according to our records, your son holds power of attorney for your affairs," the attorney had replied. "He has the legal authority to make decisions regarding your property and financial matters." Dorothy had been horrified to realize that William had somehow obtained legal control over her affairs without her knowledge or consent. That evening she had called William to demand an explanation. "William, what is the meaning of this? Why are there lawyers and appraisers on my property claiming you have power of attorney over my affairs?" "Mum, I had to take action to protect your interests," William had replied with a tone of false concern. "You're not capable of making sound financial decisions anymore, and I need to ensure that your assets are properly managed." "I never gave you power of attorney, William. How did you obtain legal authority over my affairs?" "Mom, you signed the documents last year when you were visiting Chicago. You probably don't remember because you were tired and confused." Dorothy had remembered no such signing, and she had begun to suspect that William had deceived her or manipulated her into signing documents she hadn't understood. "William, I want to revoke any power of attorney I may have signed. I want to retain my own lawyer to review these documents." "Mom, it's too late for that. The legal process is already in motion. I'm acting in your best interests, even if you don't understand that right now." The following week, Dorothy had discovered the full extent of William's betrayal when she had received notice that the farm was being put up for sale and that she was being evicted from her own property. "This is impossible," she had told her neighbor, Harold Peterson, who had been helping her understand the legal documents. "How can my own son evict me from my own land?" "Dorothy, I'm afraid these documents give him broad authority over your property and living arrangements," Harold had explained sadly. "According to this paperwork, he's claiming you're mentally incompetent to manage your own affairs." Dorothy had felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak at her son's betrayal. When William had arrived the following weekend with a moving truck and several workers, Dorothy had confronted him directly. "William, you cannot do this to me. This is my home, my life's work. You have no right to take it away from me." "Mom, I'm not taking anything away from you. I'm protecting your assets and ensuring you have proper care in your old age." "Where am I supposed to live? What am I supposed to do?" William had gestured toward the old barn on the property. "I've had the barn cleaned out and furnished with basic necessities. You can stay there temporarily while I arrange for more permanent accommodations." Dorothy had stared at her son in disbelief. "You want me to live in the barn? Like an animal?" "Mom, it's only temporary. The barn has electricity and running water. It's perfectly adequate for your needs. William, I raised you in that farmhouse. I sacrificed for years to give you opportunities. And now you want to lock me up in a barn while you sell my life's work. Mom, you're being dramatic. I'm doing what's necessary to secure your future." But Dorothy had seen the truth in her son's eyes. He wasn't protecting her. He was disposing of her so he could claim her assets without interference. That afternoon, William's workers had moved Dorothy's essential belongings into the converted barn, which had been minimally furnished with a bed, a small table, a chair, and basic bathroom facilities. "This is temporary, Mum," William had repeated as he had prepared to leave. "I'll check on you periodically to make sure you have everything you need." But as William had driven away, Dorothy had heard the sound of a heavy lock being installed on the outside of the barn door. She had realized with horror that she wasn't just being relocated, she was being imprisoned. That night, as Dorothy had sat in the converted barn, listening to the sounds of the farm she had worked for decades, she had felt more alone and betrayed than she had ever felt in her entire life. But what William had not known was that his mother possessed a strength, resourcefulness, and determination that 7 decades of farm life had developed, and that his betrayal would awaken a fighting spirit that would soon teach him lessons about family loyalty, respect for elders, and the consequences of greed that his business education had never provided. The woman he had tried to dispose of like an inconvenient obstacle was about to prove that age had not diminished her courage, her intelligence, or her ability to fight for what was rightfully hers. The discovery and the plan. 3 days into her imprisonment in the converted barn, Dorothy had begun to understand the full extent of her son's betrayal and the desperate nature of her situation. Each morning she had awakened to the sound of heavy machinery and unfamiliar voices, as William's real estate team had continued their evaluation of the property, treating her beloved farm as nothing more than a commodity to be appraised and sold. "Mrs. Mitchell, we're going to need access to all the buildings on the property," one of the appraisers had called through the locked barn door. "We'll be back tomorrow to evaluate this structure as well." Dorothy had realized that William's plan was to sell the entire farm, including the barn where he had imprisoned her, without any consideration for her well-being or her rights. The meals that William had arranged to be delivered had been minimal and institutional, prepackaged food that had been left outside the barn door, like she was a prisoner, rather than a human being deserving of dignity and respect. "This is how he sees me now," Dorothy had thought bitterly, "not as his mother, but as an obstacle to be managed until he can dispose of me permanently." But Dorothy's despair had begun to transform into determination when she had started to explore her surroundings more carefully. The barn had been part of the original homestead, built by her husband's grandfather over a century ago, and Dorothy had remembered details about its construction that William had never known. "Frank always said this barn had secrets," she had murmured to herself as she had examined the walls and floor more closely. Her exploration had revealed that one section of the barn floor had been constructed differently from the rest, with boards that had seemed newer and had been arranged in a pattern that had suggested they could be removed. Using a butter knife from her meager supplies, Dorothy had carefully pried up several floorboards, discovering a hidden compartment that had contained items left by previous generations of her family. "My goodness," she had whispered, as she had found a collection of old documents, photographs, and personal items that had been preserved in waterproof containers. Among the documents, she had discovered something that had changed everything. The original deed to the farm, which had contained legal language that William's lawyers had apparently overlooked. The deed had included a clause stating that the property could never be sold without the unanimous consent of all living descendants of the original homesteader, and that any attempt to force such a sale would result in the property reverting to a family trust. "William doesn't know about this provision," Dorothy had realized with growing excitement. His lawyers didn't do their research thoroughly enough. But even more importantly, Dorothy had found an old rotary telephone that had been connected to a separate phone line that had been installed decades earlier for emergency communications and had never been disconnected. Frank installed this line during the Cold War, she had remembered. He wanted to make sure we could always communicate with the outside world, even if the main phone lines were cut. The discovery of the working telephone had been like finding a lifeline. Her first call had been to Harold Peterson, her neighbor and longtime friend. "Harold, it's Dorothy. I need your help urgently." Dorothy, we've been worried sick about you. William told everyone you were sick and couldn't have visitors. Where are you calling from? Harold, I'm locked in the barn on my own property. William has imprisoned me here while he tries to sell the farm. I need you to contact my lawyer immediately. Harold had been shocked by the revelation. Dorothy, that's impossible. Surely William wouldn't. Harold, I'm telling you the truth. He's obtained fraudulent power of attorney documents and is trying to steal my property. I need legal help immediately. I'll call Attorney Johnson right away. Don't worry, Dorothy. We're going to get you out of there. Dorothy's second call had been to her granddaughter Madison, who had been away at college and had been unaware of her father's actions. Grandma, Dorothy? I thought you were sick. Dad said you couldn't talk to anyone. Madison, sweetheart, I need you to listen carefully. Your father has locked me in the barn and is trying to sell the farm. I need you to know the truth about what's happening. Madison had been horrified by the revelation. Grandma, that can't be true. Dad wouldn't do something like that. Madison, I'm calling you from a hidden phone in the barn where your father has imprisoned me. He's told everyone I'm mentally incompetent. But I'm as sharp as I've ever been. He's doing this because he wants to steal my property. The conversation had continued for an hour, with Dorothy explaining the situation in detail and Madison gradually realizing the truth about her father's betrayal. Grandma, what can I do to help? Madison, I need you to contact a lawyer independently and tell them what I've told you. I also need you to research the family history of this property. There are legal protections that your father doesn't know about. Over the following days, Dorothy had used the hidden telephone to coordinate a response to William's betrayal that had involved multiple allies and legal strategies. Attorney Johnson had been outraged when Harold had explained the situation. This is elder abuse and illegal imprisonment, the lawyer had declared. We need to take immediate action to protect Dorothy and challenge these fraudulent documents. Meanwhile, Madison had begun her own investigation into her father's actions, discovering financial records that had revealed the true extent of his greed. Grandma, I found documents in Dad's home office that show he's been planning this for months, Madison had reported during one of their secret phone calls. He's already negotiated a preliminary sale agreement with a development company that wants to build a shopping center on the farm. Dorothy had felt a surge of anger at this revelation. So he's not just stealing my property, he's planning to destroy it completely. Grandma, there's more. I found evidence that he forged your signature on the power of attorney documents. I have copies of the papers, and I can see where he traced your signature from other documents. This evidence had provided the legal ammunition that Attorney Johnson had needed to challenge William's authority. Dorothy, with this evidence of forgery, we can have the power of attorney documents declared invalid and have you released immediately, the lawyer had explained during a phone consultation. But Dorothy had developed a plan that had gone beyond simply regaining her freedom. Mr. Johnson, I want to do more than just get out of this barn. I want to make sure my son faces consequences for what he's done, and I want to protect this farm from any future attempts to steal it. What do you have in mind, Dorothy? I want to establish a family trust that will protect this property permanently, and I want to pursue criminal charges against William for elder abuse, fraud, and illegal imprisonment. Attorney Johnson had been impressed by Dorothy's determination and clarity of thought. Dorothy, you're thinking like someone half your age. We can definitely pursue all of those options. Meanwhile, Dorothy had also been using the hidden phone to coordinate with other family members and community supporters who had been unaware of William's actions. Her nephew Robert, Frank's brother's son, had been shocked to learn about the situation. Aunt Dorothy, I had no idea William was capable of something like this. What can I do to help? Robert, I need you to document everything that's happening here. Take photographs, gather witness statements, and help build a case against William. The community response had been swift and overwhelming. Dorothy Mitchell is one of the most respected people in this county, Harold had told Attorney Johnson. When people find out what William has done to her, there's going to be a lot of anger and support for Dorothy. Local farmers, business owners, and community leaders had begun organizing to support Dorothy and to oppose William's plans to sell the farm to developers. "This farm represents our agricultural heritage," had declared the president of the local farmers association. "We can't let some city businessman destroy it for profit." After a week of careful planning and coordination, Dorothy had been ready to implement her strategy. "Mr. Johnson, I want you to arrange for the sheriff to come to the farm tomorrow morning. I want William arrested for elder abuse and fraud, and I want to be released from this barn in front of witnesses who can document what he's done to me." "Dorothy, are you sure you want to take such a dramatic approach?" "Mr. Johnson, my son has betrayed everything our family stands for. He's treated me like an animal and tried to steal my life's work. It's time for him to face the consequences of his actions." And with those words, Dorothy had set in motion a confrontation that would expose William's betrayal to the entire community and teach him lessons about family loyalty, respect for elders, and the consequences of greed that would change his life forever. The confrontation and the reckoning. The next morning, William had arrived at the farm for what he had expected to be a routine check on his imprisoned mother and a meeting with potential buyers who were interested in purchasing the property for development. He had been accompanied by Rebecca and a team of real estate agents and investors who had been eager to finalize the sale of the farm for conversion into a commercial shopping complex. "Gentlemen, as you can see, this property offers excellent development potential," William had been explaining to the investors as they had walked across the fields. 800 acres in a prime location, with easy access to major highways and growing suburban populations. The investors had been impressed by the property's potential. "Mr. Mitchell, this location would be perfect for our retail development project," one of the developers had commented. "We are prepared to make a very generous offer." William had been calculating the enormous profit he would make from the sale when he had noticed several vehicles approaching the farm. "Who are those people?" Rebecca had asked, pointing toward a convoy of cars and trucks that had been driving up the farm's access road. William had been surprised to see Sheriff Anderson's patrol car leading the convoy, followed by Attorney Johnson's vehicle, Harold Peterson's truck, and several other cars filled with community members and family members. "I don't know what this is about," William had said with growing concern. "Let me go talk to them." As the convoy had reached the farmhouse area, Sheriff Anderson had stepped out of his patrol car with an official document in his hand. "William Mitchell?" the sheriff had called out. "Yes, that's me. What's this about, Sheriff?" "Mr. Mitchell, I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of elder abuse, fraud, and illegal imprisonment." William had stared at the sheriff in shock. "What? That's impossible. There must be some mistake." "No mistake, Mr. Mitchell. We also have a court order requiring you to immediately release your mother from the barn where you've been holding her against her will." Rebecca had looked confused and alarmed. "William, what is he talking about? Where is your mother?" Before William could answer, Attorney Johnson had stepped forward with additional legal documents. "Mr. Mitchell, I also have a restraining order preventing you from selling this property and a court order declaring the power of attorney documents you've been using to be fraudulent and invalid." The real estate investors had begun to look uncomfortable. "Mr. Mitchell, what's going on here?" "You assured us you had clear legal authority to sell this property." William had begun to realize that his carefully constructed plan was collapsing. "There's been some misunderstanding. My mother is elderly and confused. She's been making false accusations." "Mr. Mitchell," Sheriff Anderson had interrupted, "we have evidence of forgery, documentation of illegal imprisonment, and multiple witness statements. This is not a misunderstanding." At that moment, Madison had stepped out of one of the cars, carrying a folder full of documents. "Dad, I found the evidence of how you forged Grandma's signature," she had announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I have copies of the original documents and the forged power of attorney papers." William had looked at his daughter with a mixture of shock and betrayal. "Madison, what are you doing here? You don't understand the situation." "I understand perfectly, Dad. You locked Grandma in the barn like an animal while you tried to steal her property. I have proof of everything you've done." Rebecca had turned to William with horror. "William, please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you didn't lock your mother in a barn." Before William could respond, Sheriff Anderson had begun walking toward the barn. "Mrs. Mitchell, are you in there? This is Sheriff Anderson. We're here to get you out." Dorothy's voice had come clearly from inside the barn. "Sheriff Anderson, yes, I'm here. I've been locked in this barn for over a week by my own son." The sound of his mother's voice had sent a chill through William as he had realized the magnitude of what he had done. Sheriff Anderson had examined the heavy lock on the barn door. "Mr. Mitchell, you locked your 77-year-old mother in this barn. How could you do such a thing?" "It was temporary," William had protested weakly. "I was arranging for proper care for her by locking her up like a prisoner," Harold Peterson had interjected angrily. "Dorothy Mitchell is one of the finest people in this county, and you treated her like an animal." When the barn door had been opened, Dorothy had emerged with dignity and strength that had impressed everyone present. Despite her ordeal, she had looked alert, determined, and completely competent, nothing like the confused, helpless elderly woman William had described to justify his actions. "Thank you all for coming," Dorothy had said to the assembled crowd. "I want everyone to see what my son was willing to do to steal my property." The investors had immediately begun backing away from William. "Mr. Mitchell, we cannot proceed with any purchase under these circumstances," the lead developer had announced. "We don't do business with people involved in elder abuse." Rebecca had stared at William with disgust. "William, how could you do this to your own mother? How could you lock her up like this? Rebecca, you don't understand. The farm is worth millions. I was protecting our family's financial future. By abusing your mother, by committing fraud. William, I don't even know who you are anymore." Attorney Johnson had stepped forward with additional legal documents. "Mrs. Mitchell, I have the papers establishing the family trust that will protect this property permanently. I also have the documentation proving that your son's power of attorney was fraudulent." Dorothy had turned to face William directly. "William, you have betrayed everything our family stands for. You've treated me like an enemy, instead of like the mother who sacrificed for years to give you opportunities." "Mom, I was trying to protect your assets." "You were trying to steal my assets," Dorothy had interrupted. "You forged my signature, you lied to lawyers, you imprisoned me, and you planned to destroy the farm that 4 generations of our family built." The assembled community members had murmured their agreement and support for Dorothy. "William Mitchell should be ashamed of himself," one neighbor had commented loudly. "Dorothy raised him better than this." Sheriff Anderson had stepped forward with handcuffs. "Mr. Mitchell, you're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, and illegal imprisonment. You have the right to remain silent." As the sheriff had read William his rights, the full weight of his actions had finally hit him. He had looked around at the faces of the community members, his own daughter, his wife, and his mother, seeing disappointment, disgust, and anger in every expression. "Mum, I didn't mean for things to go this far," he had said as the handcuffs had been placed on his wrists. "William, you meant exactly for things to go this far," Dorothy had replied. "You planned every step of this betrayal. The only thing you didn't plan for was getting caught." As William had been led away to the sheriff's car, Rebecca had approached Dorothy with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Mitchell, I had no idea what William was doing. If I had known—" "Rebecca, I believe you didn't know," Dorothy had replied with grace. "But now you know what kind of man you married." Madison had hugged her grandmother tightly. "Grandma, I'm so sorry this happened to you. I'm ashamed of what my father did." "Madison, you're not responsible for your father's choices, but I'm proud of you for doing the right thing when you learned the truth." As the sheriff's car had driven away with William in custody, Dorothy had stood in front of the barn where she had been imprisoned, surrounded by family members and community supporters who had rallied to her defense. "This farm will remain in our family," she had announced, "and it will be protected by a trust that ensures no one can ever again try to steal it for personal gain." The confrontation had exposed William's betrayal to the entire community and had begun a legal process that would hold him accountable for his crimes against his own mother. But more importantly, it had demonstrated that Dorothy Mitchell, at 77 years old, possessed the courage, intelligence, and determination to fight for what was rightfully hers and to protect the legacy that her family had built over generations. The justice and the redemption. 6 months after William's arrest, the legal proceedings had concluded with results that had satisfied Dorothy's desire for justice while also providing opportunities for family healing and redemption. William had been sentenced to 2 years in prison for elder abuse and fraud, with the possibility of early release for good behavior and completion of counseling programs designed to address his issues with greed and family relationships. The court finds that Mr. Mitchell's actions represent a serious betrayal of trust and a callous disregard for his mother's rights and dignity, Judge Patricia Reynolds had declared during sentencing. However, the court also recognizes the possibility of rehabilitation and the importance of family reconciliation. The criminal conviction had also resulted in the complete invalidation of all of William's attempts to control Dorothy's property and finances. Mrs. Mitchell, you now have full legal control of your property and affairs, Attorney Johnson had explained. The family trust we established will protect the farm permanently, and your son will never again be able to make decisions about your life without your consent. But perhaps more importantly, the experience had led to significant changes in family relationships and community awareness about elder abuse. Madison had taken a leave of absence from college to spend time with her grandmother and to help manage the farm operations. "Grandma, I want to learn everything about farming and about our family history," Madison had declared. "I never realized how important this place was until I almost lost it." Dorothy had been delighted by her granddaughter's interest. "Madison, this farm needs young people who understand its value and are willing to work to preserve it. I'd be honored to teach you everything I know." The partnership between Dorothy and Madison had proven to be extraordinarily successful. Madison had brought modern technology and innovative farming techniques to the operation, while Dorothy had provided decades of practical knowledge and experience. "We're implementing sustainable farming practices that will improve soil health and increase productivity," Madison had explained to visitors. "Grandma's traditional knowledge combined with modern science is creating something better than either could achieve alone." The farm had also become a model for intergenerational cooperation and elder empowerment. "What Dorothy and Madison have accomplished here demonstrates that age and youth can work together to create something remarkable," had observed Dr. Linda Foster, a gerontologist who had studied their partnership. Dorothy's experience proves that older adults can continue to be productive and independent when they're treated with respect and given appropriate support. Rebecca had filed for divorce from William, unable to reconcile herself with his betrayal of his own mother. "I married a man I thought had character and integrity," she had explained to Dorothy during a difficult conversation. "When I learned what he did to you, I realized I didn't know him at all." Dorothy had shown remarkable grace toward her daughter-in-law. "Rebecca, you're not responsible for William's choices. I hope you can find happiness and peace, regardless of what happens with your marriage." Trevor, William's son, had initially been defensive of his father, but had gradually come to understand the magnitude of his father's betrayal. "Grandma Dorothy, I want to apologize for not believing you initially," Trevor had said during a visit to the farm. "I thought Dad was just being practical about business, but I realize now that what he did was cruel and wrong." "Trevor, you were loyal to your father, which shows good character," Dorothy had replied. "Now you know the truth, and you can make your own decisions about what kind of man you want to be." The community response to Dorothy's situation had also led to increased awareness about elder abuse and the need to protect vulnerable older adults. Dorothy's case opened our eyes to how easily older adults can be victimized by their own family members, had observed Sarah Martinez, director of the county's Adult Protective Services. We've implemented new protocols to identify and prevent elder abuse based on what we learned from her experience. Local law enforcement had also received additional training on recognizing signs of elder abuse and financial exploitation. The Dorothy Mitchell case taught us that elder abuse can happen in any family, regardless of wealth or social status, Sheriff Anderson had explained. We're now better equipped to identify and respond to these situations. After serving 18 months of his sentence, William had been released on parole and had requested a meeting with his mother. "Mom, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness," William had said during their first conversation since his arrest. "But I want you to know that I understand now how wrong I was and how much I hurt you." Dorothy had listened carefully to her son's words, evaluating his sincerity. "William, forgiveness isn't something that happens instantly. It's something that's earned over time through changed behavior and genuine remorse." "I understand, Mom. I've lost everything, my marriage, my business reputation, my relationship with my children. I've had a lot of time to think about what I did and why I did it." "And what have you concluded?" "I concluded that I became so obsessed with money and status that I forgot about the people who mattered most. I treated you like an obstacle instead of like the mother who sacrificed for me." Dorothy had seen genuine remorse in her son's eyes, but she had also maintained appropriate caution. "William, if you want to rebuild our relationship, you'll have to prove through your actions that you've really changed. Words are easy, but trust has to be earned." Over the following months, William had slowly begun the process of rebuilding his relationships with his family. He had found work as a financial counselor, helping people avoid the mistakes he had made, and he had begun attending therapy to address his issues with greed and family relationships. "I'm working with people who are struggling with debt and financial problems," William had explained to Dorothy during one of their monthly meetings. "It's helping me remember that money should serve people, not the other way around." Madison had been particularly cautious about rebuilding her relationship with her father. "Dad, I'm willing to give you a chance, but you have to understand that what you did to Grandma was unforgivable in my eyes. You'll have to work very hard to earn back my respect." "I understand, Madison. I'm grateful for any opportunity to prove that I can be a better father and a better son." 2 years after the initial crisis, Dorothy had made a decision that had surprised everyone. "I've decided to allow William to visit the farm regularly and to participate in family gatherings," she had announced. "But he will never again have any authority over my affairs or my property." "Grandma, are you sure about this?" Madison had asked. "After what he did to you?" "Madison, I'm 79 years old now, and I've learned that holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts him. I'm willing to give him a chance to prove he's changed, but I'll never again be vulnerable to his betrayal." The family trust that had been established had ensured that the farm would be protected for future generations. "This property will remain in the family and will be managed by people who understand its value and are committed to preserving it," Attorney Johnson had explained. "No one person will ever again be able to make unilateral decisions about selling or developing this land." Madison had been designated as the primary heir and future manager of the farm, with provisions for other family members to participate in its management and benefit from its success. "I'm committed to preserving this farm and everything it represents," Madison had declared. "Grandma's courage in fighting for it has inspired me to dedicate my life to protecting our family's legacy." 3 years after her imprisonment in the barn, Dorothy had reflected on the experience during a family gathering at the farm. "What happened to me was terrible, but it also taught me important lessons about my own strength and the importance of fighting for what's right," she had observed. "I discovered that age doesn't mean helplessness and that it's never too late to stand up for yourself." William had been present at the gathering, having slowly earned back a limited place in the family through consistent demonstration of changed behavior. "Mom, I want to thank you for giving me a second chance," he had said. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to try to be a better son." "William, forgiveness is a process, not an event," Dorothy had replied. "You've made progress, but rebuilding trust takes time." The farm had thrived under Dorothy and Madison's management, becoming a model of sustainable agriculture and intergenerational cooperation. "We're producing higher yields than ever before, while improving soil health and environmental sustainability," Madison had reported. "Grandma's traditional knowledge combined with modern techniques is creating remarkable results." The story of Dorothy's courage and resilience had spread throughout the region, inspiring other older adults to stand up for their rights and refuse to be victimized. Dorothy Mitchell's example has shown other seniors that they don't have to accept abuse or exploitation, had observed Dr. Foster. Her courage has empowered countless other older adults to fight for their dignity and independence. Local schools had begun inviting Dorothy to speak to students about farming, family history, and the importance of respecting elders. Mrs. Mitchell's story teaches us that older people have valuable knowledge and experience that we need to preserve and respect, had commented a high school principal. Her courage in standing up to abuse is an inspiration to people of all ages. 5 years after the crisis, Dorothy had celebrated her 82nd birthday surrounded by family, friends, and community members who had supported her during her darkest hour. "I never imagined that being locked in a barn would lead to so many positive changes in my life and my family," she had reflected during her birthday speech. "Sometimes the worst experiences teach us the most important lessons about our own strength and the value of standing up for what's right." William had been present at the celebration, having earned back a place in the family through years of consistent effort to prove his transformation. "Mom, you taught me that real wealth isn't measured in money, but in relationships, respect, and the legacy we leave for future generations," he had said. "I'm sorry it took such a terrible experience for me to learn that lesson." In the vast plains of Nebraska, where 4 generations of Mitchells had worked the land and built their lives, Dorothy had proven that age was not a limitation, but an accumulation of wisdom and strength. That family bonds could survive even the worst betrayals when there was genuine remorse and effort to change, and that it was never too late to fight for dignity, justice, and the protection of what matters most. The barn, where she had been imprisoned, had been converted into a community center where older adults could gather, learn new skills, and support each other in maintaining their independence and dignity. This building represents both the worst and the best of human nature, Dorothy had observed during the dedication ceremony. It reminds us that abuse can happen anywhere, but it also shows us that courage and community support can overcome even the most difficult circumstances. The lesson Dorothy had taught her family and her community would resonate for generations. That respect for elders is not optional but essential. That greed and betrayal ultimately destroy the relationships that give life meaning, and that courage and determination can triumph over even the most heartless betrayal when supported by community and guided by justice. And that's the end of our incredible story. If you liked this powerful story about the millionaire son who locked his 77-year-old mother in the old barn, but she surprised everyone with her courage, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that will move you and make you reflect on the most important values in life. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching us from in the United States or anywhere in the world? What do you think about William's decision to imprison his own mother to steal her property? Do you believe Dorothy was right to fight back against her son's betrayal? Have you ever seen situations where adult children abuse elderly parents for financial gain? What would you do if you discovered a family member was being abused like Dorothy was? Do you think William's eventual redemption was genuine or just convenient? Do you know similar stories of elderly people who showed incredible courage in difficult situations? What do you think about Madison's decision to help her grandmother fight against her own father? Do you believe families can heal from such serious betrayals? We love knowing that we have followers in every corner of the country who value the importance of protecting our elderly, respecting family bonds, and standing up against abuse no matter who commits it. Until the next story that will inspire you and make you reflect on how we should treat our loved ones and how courage can triumph over even the worst betrayals.